Okay, once again, a very warm welcome to everybody that's joining us today. It's pleased to have you once again on one of our webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Usability and Application Design. It's led by Nathalie Cotte, one of our product owners and usability specialists. It's a very interesting webinar. It'll give you some concrete examples on how to enhance the user experience within your application development. We would also like to welcome and invite everybody to actively take part in by submitting any questions that you might have. There's a chat and a question window located at the bottom of your GoToWebinar dashboard down to the right. And our webinar host will try to answer as many questions as possible that you might have towards the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Nathalie Cotte.
Hi everyone. So I have been working in Bonita for 5 years as a usability person, and also this last year as a product owner in the agile methodology. But before that, I have worked 10 years as a usability consultant in a consulting agency. And what I would like to share today is a bit of what I learned on this road, give you some concepts on usability, methodology on how to make it work when you integrate a usability person among a team of developers in a project team already working, and also some information how to build good UIs. And we'll also go and define the difference between user experience, user interfaces, and what usability really means. So let's go and check the agenda, the content. So we'll first go for a little summary to introduce the talk, and then start the once upon a time story with some adventures, and then the turn of events on how it was complicated and then it became more simple, and then just one slide of the moral of the story. So let's start. So as a summary, user experience is often seen as a complicated topic. We hear about how an application should be useful, desirable, usable, valuable, findable, accessible, credible, and all of this participates in the definition of the user experience. So actually the user experience is everything a user finds when he's thinking, interacting, learning, doing something with the application. And usability is how to make it good, right? When it's usable, it's user-friendly. So this is what usability is all about. Then the user interfaces are just a means for the users to interact with the system. It can be screen and keyboard and mouse, it can be vocal, it can be touch. So it's just a means, right, that you need to design great so the user experience overall is good. So what I would like to summarize for you is that the usability is really a perceived value of what the team has designed. It can be technically very good, but if the usability is not there, then the perceived value will not be as good, right? Even if the code is great. And it's also a matter of points of view. It's a very important matter to realize that the team point of view, the product leader point of view is always so different from the user's point of view. And this is something that has taken time to make it through the teams that I've interacted with along those years. And then it's really a state of mind. It's really getting the implication, the involvement of the whole team to make it work after all. So we'll go through those things. So eventually, usability is not that complicated, and I'll try to make it simple today. First thing is, as the agile methodology pushes us to do, really you need to experiment, because teams are all different and the concepts I'm going to introduce today may not all work for all teams, of course. So I've been running lots of in vivo experiments that I'm going to share. The idea is not to get a precipitate, I don't know if it works in English as well as in French, when you do chemicals, mixes, sometimes you get a precipitate, but also it's the precipitation of somebody from a building when things are not going well that we would like to avoid. Instead, we would like to go to a smooth emulsion when everything is perfectly mixed and makes something good and smells good. So once upon a time, what is the curriculum of everybody who is working in the usability field? And I'm one among those guys. First, you need to learn about cognitive sciences. You learn a lot of things about how the brain works as you would learn for a computer. So you get linguistics, neuroscience, philosophy, psychology, anthropology, artificial intelligence. You get to know all those things to understand how the brain works. So what we learn, and this is something that you can take away, is that all brains work according to this very simplified schema. First, when a user gets to a user interface, you need to catch the attentional focus. You need to bring eyes, since we are talking about applications and screens, to the right thing the person needs to see first. So you need to use the senses and the characteristics of the senses to view the information that is very important first. Then you need to do everything that is possible to decode this information. And when decoding, then the brain uses the beliefs and the memories he has accumulated and computed from the past experiences. And this is very important to know, that a user never comes onto a screen not knowing anything about what he expects. He has a lot of expectations without even knowing it. Then you need to help the decision making, provide the right controls, right? Then the action is here. Decision making is also explaining all the options available. And then when the action is done with the control, you need to give feedback. Always give feedback, even when the action is actually doing okay and everything is right. Otherwise, the user may need to do the action once again just to check, or lose time just to find out what are the consequences of the action he has performed. So then the feedback should catch the attentional focus. And then when the feedback has been caught, it feeds the beliefs and the memory, so that the next time the user comes in front of the UI again, he will decode and interpret and make decisions and act even faster. So this loop is always something that is going on when the user watches an application screen. So we all work the same. And after cognitive ergonomics, cognitive sciences, what you need to learn as a usability person is ergonomics in the way of people working in an environment. So I've been working in this field. I'm not doing a B2C products. I'm always been involved in the B2B market. And so what we realize here, even if it's in French, is that the environment of work is a very complex matter. There's a lot of components, right? The organization, management, so human relationships, conditions of work. You may have heard about psychosocial risks in enterprises, and how to conceive the space and the tools of working. So what you learn in this curriculum is that as an employee, a team or a company, everyone works with goals, sub-goals, and tasks. It may be easy to understand at the strategic level. You have goals to perform for a team, but then this translates into sub-goals and tasks for employees. So let's take another example, for example, the customer support team. The companies has goals, then the team has also goals and sub-goals, and then the employees have tasks, or it's not translated. So the goal of the company is to grow and to satisfy customers. Right, that's pretty basic. Now the team, the customer support team, needs to answer tickets with relevance and on time. And for the employee, what it means is that he needs to handle a ticket within a sorted list. So the UI you need to provide is this sorted list where the employee will be able to pick the right one, so he will complete the sub-goals of the team that will complete the goals of the company. So it's always broken down into tasks to feed sub-goals and goals. Always, always, and each action actually feeds the completion of a task involved in sub-goals and goals. So this is what you learn, and eventually what you learn also is that the application, the business applications you're providing, is only a little tiny something in the overall working environment. So it's in the spaces and tools. So sometimes the developers, they're really proud of what they develop and produce, and they sometimes think that the users will immediately fall in love with the applications developed because it's so much energy, so much ego, so much pressure to develop this. But eventually, it's only one tool, and maybe it can be replaced with another tool if the user does not manage to accomplish what he meant to accomplish when first coming on this application. So it's very important to be humble about what we develop, just to putting it back into the global environment. So then the software ergonomics that we also call usability. I was talking about points of view and difference of points of view. This is this one sentence we really need to memorize, that you are not your user. The team that develops is not the user. It can never be, because the situation of work is just not the same. So every time you code for others means that you need to mind the user experience. So in a techno-centered design way of doing things, with the piece of software or the application, what you see here is the long way that the user needs to do to understand and use the application if you really focus on technology and data first. So this is not what we would recommend. What we would recommend is the user-centered design, because you code for others, so you need to focus on the users. And so the piece of software, the application, really needs to do this way, to go and meet the users so that the user then can smile, because everything has been thought and designed and implemented according to him or her. What we also learn is that 68% of users can quit using a website with the impression that they are not taken care of. So the things you want to sell is taken care of, but the user himself or herself is not really taken care of. 97% of users quote ease of use as the main factor to choose a business application. Very important. And then before 2020, user experience will be a differentiator that is more important than price sometimes for some teams. So it's very important to focus on those. Then what we learn as students is those very complex and vague principles of UI design, like guidance, like workload, explicit control. I pass them very fast just on purpose. It's adaptability, error management, or consistency, significance of code, compatibility. And this is extremely delicate and complex to really translate into what you should do on the screen, right? So what you learn also is this iteration is the right way of doing things. You need to interact very often with your users, as much as you can, of course. So it takes some iterations to make things good, because you talk about concepts and ideas and needs, and then you go with the first prototype that is really low reliability, and then you improve it, and then you eventually make the code. But on each step you have validated with users, and this is what makes you still go on the right direction, instead of taking some specs, developing, and then delivering, hoping it will be good. We'll see this later on. And also when you're in this curriculum of usability, you learn that you'll be collaborating with developers. And for you, developers are just magicians. They're wizards. From nothing, they can do what we see here, that is the studio at Bonita, the Bonita platform. They can do the UI designer that allows our customers and users to develop their UI for their own customized applications. They can also develop some application designers so that our customers create the application, customized business applications. And also we developed a generic application that is called the portal, so that task lists can allow our users to just execute tasks within the process. So you learn that from nothing, developers will create great things. For example, this we don't see, but this is the engine that will make all tasks and process execute behind the hood. So just to remind the fact that Bonita Soft works in the business business process management field, the digital transformation field, and the low-code application development platform. So all of this is created from out of nothing from the developers, right? So you learn that you will work with those wizards. But those wizards really prefer to be called craftsmen, right? So it's a good comparison that we can make. Craftsmen are not artists, right? They work towards a goal, and they work with some basic, like for example, let's take they take soil and they create these teapots, and it's pretty good, it's pretty authentic, and it's pretty usable. And then Don Norman, a very important person in the usability field, has also created a joke on this, saying, okay, you're a craftsman, but sometimes you lose why you're doing the artifact that you're creating, and this teapot is clearly not usable, of course. So usability is also brought in the field of craftsmanship. At Bonita Soft, we have preferred considering developers as heroes, and this is also a good point for me because heroes have unique virtues. For example, they have an impeccable logic, they have a sense of responsibility, they have empathy, courage, and humility, and these are the values that I've worked on with development teams all through the career I have now. And particularly, as I mentioned before, on the humility part of this collaboration, because we are just a tool within the environment of work of our customers. So it's about a joke, but then our developers are more supermen than magicians. So now the adventures. As a usability consultant, you come day one and you're really motivated and you think you're going to save the world with usability, working with developers for common customers. But after 1 year, it doesn't work really good because the developers have a lot of common interpretations about usability, and what you end up thinking as a usability person is that maybe either alone or as a team, maybe the developers are not brought, don't learn that they will have to collaborate with other people with other skills, and they think that maybe they're self-sufficient. So it's the first step you have to do, and realizing that collaboration is not part of the developer agenda sometimes. So there are also a lot of commonplaces, as I said. We really often hear that everybody has common sense, and then UX is just an optional polish to put on the technological foundations. UX is an additional constraint of time and cost with short release deadlines. So we clearly hear that we are an option, and this is really what happened when I was working as a consultant. Our developers would make commercial proposals, and at the end there was a little line about optionally we can make it usable if you need. But mostly our developers will make it usable anyway because it's a common sense and everybody has common sense. My manager used to say, I've always thought usability was just peasant common sense. It works in French, le bon sens paysan, saying it's everybody's business and everybody's skills to make things usable. So what happens is that you have development teams with no usability person, no interaction with users, and it's all by ourselves. So you have specifications, a technical proof of concept, then an alpha version that is working, a bug-free as much as we can, beta version, and an end-to-end tested release. So you release. But then sometimes, and very most often, you get painful customers' feedback. So what happens is that you have big reworks when the team is already working on the next release or on another next project. And so it means to amendments to the contract you have with your customers, and then it gets tension. Because you have said everyone has common sense, so it should work with our users, but it doesn't. So let's say, okay, UX is a job in itself. It's a required polish to put on technological foundations, but it's also an additional constraint with short release deadlines. Now let's see why it's considered as a polish. and why it's an additional constraint. When you think that usability is just a polish, what you can do is still work on only the project team with development team, and then you call the usability consultant as a last resort. So you do exactly the same. So instead that the end-to-end tested release is just a release candidate, and then you'll call for usability validation. So what it leads to is that the Superman development team says, okay, we're all done. Is that user-friendly? Is that sexy? Is also something we hear a lot about usability, like sexiness. So it ends up as about 200 raw reports of usability improvements. They're sorted by user flow risk levels. Risk 0 is like a typo, and then risk 4 is that the user did not manage doing what he was intending to do. But then it's insane. How would you like a development team thinking they're all done to manage and handle such nightmare? So then, in the end, nothing is really improved. There's no more time to allocate to this project. The application is released. No one is really proud because they know that there are things that are not right about usability. And then everyone hates the usability consultant. She's guilty of bringing this bad news just at the end of the project. So now, okay, UX is a job in itself. It's required an integrated component. We see it cannot be just a polish at the end of the project. But when you are hired as an internal usability specialist, an integrated component, you arrive day one. You're not that fresh as before, okay, but you still have some motivation to bring to the development team. And also these are real Bonita softwares that I've seen rowing on a competition with these guys as real heroes. So I thought, okay, it's going to work as planned. But then after 30 days, 1 month of trying, it didn't feel right. Actually, the R&D was very upset with me coming up with the requirements and questions about improvement. Why? Because the project situation was pretty bad. We were late, and it was not the right time to onboard a usability person with these 200 raw reports of usability improvements. So it was a nightmare, and there was no time, no opportunity. So what we can learn from this is that usability person should be onboarded at the beginning of a project, really working on brand new features, at least features. The project, the application may be running for some years, but then you're working on something new, and this is when the usability person should come. So for some time, I just went and do something else, and actually I started training the development team so that when the project is shipped, we start something new and we start on common basics. So we know that it's a required and integrated component, but it's difficult, and also it can be seen as additional constraint when time and cost with short release deadlines. And I think we all have short release deadlines. So is it a fatality that it's an additional constraint? Why are we talking about constraints? We can see that 50% of development time is sometimes spent on solving issues that could be avoided through better design or more usability testing. So usability indeed serves a common goal. It's not a constraint. It makes the team globally more efficient. It shows the value of all the design and development efforts, and it guides towards the perceived value. It makes the value come true. The code builds something that the users really enjoy and that really has value to them. So we need to work with the usability person, share on a day-to-day basis, find how to best work together through experimentations, really. And then if you want to learn things about the principle of usability, you can do it, but it's still optional because they are complementary skills, and the usability person can still share this, bear this role of the usability principle. It's all right. So everyone can get involved in more usability, and this is a common goal, even with short release deadlines. So how do we do, because deadlines are still short, how do we make it come true then? Well, at first, even though people knew we had to work together, there was a question of priority. Should we build a new feature or improve existing features? Well, oftentimes it's translated in new features still, but ambitious roadmaps fit the usability depth. If you don't improve, then you have a depth that keeps growing. Another question of priority. Okay, you have agreed on building a new feature. Should it start with the feasibility proof of concept or research of the use cases? And oftentimes, you want to be reassured that we can do it. The feature has a title. We mostly see what it should mean so we can try and make it happen technically. And then we will see what we can do with the technical solutions we have come up with. But then to be reassured on the feasibility doesn't help being reassured on the value. And sometimes it's too late when you want to see what you can do with the technical solution. Then you don't have time to really investigate on what you should do for your users. The priority is, should we bug fix or make improvements, usability improvements, because they are not considered as the same, as you know. Well, a zero bug policy maintenance type fits usability depth. You want to go zero defect, but the thing is, if the user cannot be successful at doing what he meant to do when looking at the UI, maybe it should be considered as a priority, as a bigger priority, than if it's a small bug happening on some use cases that are not the basic ones, advanced use cases, for example, and that are not critical. So minor bugs should maybe not be considered as as a higher priority, than some usability issues. And it's really difficult to make that happen. So what happened is that I heard a lot of "Dear Nathalie, we must release on a fixed date. Other features are waiting in the queue for this release. We spent enough time on this feature. You cannot always push for more perfection on the usability, so you must stop now." Only based on time spent, without a sense of the value delivered, that was a fight, a consistent fight between the project owners at the time and the usability. So actually people in the US have built this fight for UX company where they really think they need to fight because users deserve a better experience. You see the baseline, it's time the world knows the power of UX. But come on, we're not going to really fight. What about the emotion? We want to work together. So let's try to find something maybe more creative so that we can manage. So that was the turn of events. Actually, the needs of a heroic team is a team spirit first, a clear goal, data from the field, and a threshold. This really comes down to those four things. We want to create a simple, objective, Boolean usability event. So the team, we want to be proud together of what we release. We want to know that everyone has a role to play, and we know that open-mindedness makes us work together. So it can really seem ideal, but it really works out this way. So we want also a clear, non-negotiable goal. So I went and trained about non-negotiable usability for a while. The user must be at success in what she intends to do, so she can find a value. We do not target perfection in the UI, but good enough. And good enough is decided through validation, not time spent. We need data from the field so that we don't debate. The data collection is at the center of the process. The only way to be objective is to have data. And so long to partial discussions of aunts and cousins. Yeah, my aunt would do this, but my cousin would do that, so I think we should really do this. We don't know until we have seen that happen with real users testing the first iteration of the feature. And so the threshold is clear. The user is either successful or he failed. So the feature means that the feature is either ready to be shipped or not ready. If the user is not successful, the feature is not ready. And also, The gain is that the usability feedback should be considered as bugs. They have the same level of priority after this has been implemented in Bonita. So also from vague principles of usability, I went on and created a checklist, again, to make things more simple. So this is something you can also take away. The good user experience is to make your users, whoever they are, succeed in all use cases. They need to learn about how to use this application. They need to avoid and recover from error. They need to be efficient while doing their tasks. And that would be the most, they need to enjoy it. They need to show the satisfaction. So it makes a usable grid here that you can also rely on to remember those. So we can even simplify again. From this list, not everything is non-negotiable. But what is really non-negotiable is that you should know the personas. You should really know the users you really want to design for. Then maybe some other profiles of users may come to your applications and try to do things. But these are not the focus. So you really need to focus and know what the personas are. The success is still very important, but maybe you can focus on just basic use cases on this feature that you're creating. Avoidance and recovery from errors is non-negotiable. Learning on how to use the feature is non-negotiable. Then what is negotiable is efficiency, because you don't know what they will call efficient. So, and it's really hard to measure. So it's not really Boolean this time. And also the enjoyment, how to measure satisfaction. Yes, there are scales, but it's not really easy to really rely on this and make the team say, okay, the feature is ready to be delivered because the satisfaction is rated 6 out of 10. It's really not a Boolean that we can use, we thought. So let's make it real now. Create and know your main personas. Succeed means collect and write use cases and stories. Learn means make a feature easy to find, make its value easy to get, make it understandable by the target personas. And then avoid and recover from errors means create guiding elements to avoid errors and write clear and complete messages to recover from errors. So now create and know your main personas. What it means, personas. This is the booklet that we have created in 2015. We keep improving this. We have Dave, our Java backend developer. We have Fred, our front-end developer. And we have Sam, our system administrator. These are the 3 profiles we assume every team at our customers should have at a minimum. And then we have created a whole lot of content about those personas so that we keep that in mind when we design and we implement features for those guys. Then what? Make a feature easy to find. What it means is, for example, you create a tour. You have a new feature, you are web-based, then you can create a tour. It means a little pop-up here and there just to explain and point to the new features that you have developed. With Bonita UI Designer, you can use the model widget that you can create through our tutorial just to make that happen. The user connects on the application after you have updated it, and he sees that there is a new feature, and you can explain where to find it and how it works very briefly. There are a whole lot of tools that you can use that are already available to use. So this is to catch attention. Also to catch attention, you can use what we have called promo tips. We have a feature in Bonita that allows the user to extend our REST API capabilities, but maybe it's not easy to find in the studio, and maybe you haven't read the release notes for this. So we tip it where in the UI Designer you can work on API to find your variables. Then we say, hey, you can extend our REST API capabilities by creating extensions in the studio menu. called development and use them here. So we try to advertise for our new features here and there so that it's easy to find. Then make the value of a feature easy to get. Explain what it brings to the user. We knew that this feature that we have developed was not really easy to use, so we brought examples. By examples, on the right, you can see that you can easily copy and paste those examples and make them work for you so that you can realize what you can do with it. By giving examples, you give you give the whole extent of what the feature is capable of for your different use cases. Of course, make its value easy to get through tutorials, documentations. Tutorials could be text, they're easier to maintain. They can be videos, they're harder to maintain, but much easier to use, of course. Make it understandable by target personas. What it means is that, for example, you can have contextual help. This is also easy to do with the UI designer. You have text areas. You can work on CSS properties and make those wells with blue information that explains what a feature is, maybe a new feature is, and how to use it. You can also reference some documentation pages for links so that it's not always easy to switch to a documentation document or a documentation site, but if you start using the UI to prompt for more documentation, it can work easier. We also have contextual help in the studio that we have implemented. We have some tooltips also to make things understandable. Through tooltips, we explain the nature of what we mean. Like, for example, in the UI designer here, we have headers, but they're used in some context that needs to be explained, so we use the tooltip. Again, tooltipping in the UI designer can be reached by using modal windows. And also we embed some help. Some documentation is embedded in the UI designer so that it's easier to find. You don't have to switch to the site, the documentation site. And this can also be done in the customized applications you are building with the UI designer and Bonita through the modal window. It's pretty easy to use. And also in the UI designer, it's translated, which in the web documentation side is not. It's only in English. So it gives a more accessible information. Then create guiding elements to avoid and recover from errors. For example, here we have used the caption characteristic, the caption property, to say what we expect here is a comma-separated list of elements. So the user does not have to wonder if it's separated by commas, spaces, or something else, so the errors are avoided. And this can be just used as any input field or any text field, that you will have in the UI designer. We also have default values. If having no values makes the system inconsistent, then just provide basic default values that the system will use. And if you place the focus of the user interface on this value, then it will prompt the user to change it and make it its own, to customize it. Warnings is also a good way to avoid errors. You have validated something. For now, it doesn't look good, so you just issue a warning, and maybe the user knows it will have to be changed later on to be totally consistent, but maybe not. So you bring some information and you minimize the workload that the user has to remember what to do to eventually validate everything that has to be validated so the system is consistent. This is a bad example of warning that I wanted to share with you. This is my bad. We have tried to issue a very important warning when people change the model of the business data in the studio. But by wanting to give too many information, we have just come to a point where users click OK and they don't read of course, it's too much information here to understand. So what we have decided is to hide some of this information, just provide one sentence of what may be wrong, and then hide this in a link that is called more information, and when the user clicks on it, it expands and give the rest of the information. So sometimes you hear that for good usability, the number of clicks is a really important indicator. But in this case, you really need to make it available through a click. What we have observed is that too much information, at first make people click away. But if you have this link of more information, then you catch attention, and then most of the time users will click to know more. So it's really good feedback that we got. Another warning here in the UI designer. Another type of information you need to give as feedback. Sometimes the user wants to delete something. Well, if deleting means to the creation of, if deleting was made by mistake, and then the user has to redo the element from scratch, and if this action takes a lot of time, then you need to issue such confirmation window. Are you really sure you want to delete this information? But this is not always the case. If the deletion is an error, but recreating the element is really quick, then you really don't need to issue this type of a window. And when you do this, it may be also bothersome from the user. So if you delete a lot and deletion has no major consequences, do not issue such a warning window. And you always need to give feedback when actions are okay. Everything went right, so it's good to know. It's always good to know that the click and the action has been performed. Then to avoid errors, you really also need sometimes when what you're doing, what the user is doing is really complex, to give a status, a global status of everything that is good, not good, and are in errors. So we have this in the studio as well. Now, a good thing to remember is that the error messages should be as close as possible as the location where the error happened. For example, here, just M is a capital M, and this is not something we support as a format. We do not want to always say that it should begin with a lower letter, but here the message is pretty far away from the cell where the error happened. So in this case, we use the color, the red color, to make the user focus on the fact that there is a problem. But most of the time, when you can really put the error message as close as possible to the user's focus at the time he's inputting information. And we also have some errors here as well in the UI designer. Now, what should be considered as a clear and complete error message to recover from an error? Well, an error message may include the following. It should say there is a problem, not always calling this an error, because if you have not said that a password should have certain rules, should follow certain rules, then it's not fair to say that the user has made an error. So you can say there is a problem and remind the rules of the password, but you should have clearly stated the rules of a correct password before that, before the user even entered anything. So don't always call it an error when it's a user mistake, because sometimes the system is responsible for the mistake or the error on the first place. You need to state the cause if you think it brings something useful to the user. You may state the severity, same thing, if you think it brings something to the user. You need to say the consequences of on the user's action. Remember, the user wants to perform some task, and maybe because of this error, the task has not been performed, or it has been performed partially. This needs to be stated. You need to say what the options are to recover, and please provide shortcuts in the form of buttons for those options. It's just so nice and so efficient not to click just OK and then search for how to recover by yourself. And also you should write all of this at a level the target persona can understand. If this feature is used by several personas, one non-technical, one technical, first level should be the non-technical one, and then again provide a link with more technical details as an expand collapse text area, so that the technical person will get more information by clicking on a link. Then how we formalized all of this in the process that we have put in place. We run surveys at our customers to collect information on the specific needs for a feature we want to develop. Then we create mock-ups in the form of co-design sessions with both customers and the R&D team and the product owner. Then we implement those things with the personas in mind, so that we always have a good sense of the level of information we want to provide. Then we want to test it with real people with some iterations. And then you remember it's Boolean. If the tester is not successful, then we go back to co-design sessions, implementation, and test. And then we finalize with, again, the personas in mind. All through this process, we need to interact with users with some iterations. So now we're doing pretty good on the collection. We know our personas, we identify customers and projects, then we gather a panel of users that will follow us all through the development, the design and the development of the feature. Then we run some agile methodology called Design Studio, where we manage to create the mock-ups. And also the storytelling means we really tell a story of our personas using the feature from beginning to end. And this helps with the documentations we have to write eventually. Then, only then, we go to the proof of concepts at the technical level. And then we define some must-have of the feature, so the basic use cases we want to provide. And then we make a split of all of this, and we create the backlog for this feature to be implemented. All of this are all things that we do pretty well with the testing. I just wanted to emphasize here the test at my desk session that we have invented. I'm going to go through this just in a while. I think it works pretty good at Bonita Soft. So for example, the test at my desk session really works as the Boolean for us. The developer is ready as if he had to run a demonstration, but instead he invites an internal user at his desk. We are lucky at Bonita Soft, we have consultants. They're our power user, and we can have them sometimes to test when they're not busy with the expertise at customers or giving trainings. But most of the time we have 2 to 3 consultants to help us with validating. If you don't have consultants, then again you invite people from the users panel you have created at the beginning. So there is no demonstration, but the developer expresses the use cases we have implemented. Then he gives the mouse and keyboard to the user. Then he tries to understand what's going on, and he takes notes. So it does not explain, it does not show how well or how good the feature is, but it just watches what's going on. And then he needs to write if there is success or failure in the use cases, in the scenario the users needed to perform, the task he wanted to perform. And then he repeats this with 3 to 5 users. So he invites 1 and then either 2 more or 5 more, depending on the results. Maybe after 3 users, you always have the same feedback on the same elements, the same wording or the same user flow that is not proper enough and that you need to rework. So it's okay. You don't need 2 more people. You know what you need to rework already with 3 people. It's really powerful and efficient. So then the finalization is knowing the limitations. Now there is a date for the release, so you know what you don't have time to implement, so you write the documentation to overcome those maybe optional issues that your users will come into when using the platform or the new feature. You also write the embedded help. You also have the tutorials to overcome that, but at least you know when you release the feature what you will have to explain. So the moral of the story, to finish with, is that everyone can get involved in more usability, not just the usability specialist. It is a required and integrated component of the development of a software or an application or a feature. And this is a common goal when time is short. So all we need as a team is really to build the team around a goal, some data, so that it's really not partial or subjective. And we need a threshold to decide whether to stop or work again on a feature. So I wanted to thank our sponsor, Lego, for always providing us ideas on how to make things more easy to explain instead of text, more images. And so we really think that the finality of the goal of what we're doing is good UX, so that we have no tension within the team, but also when we release a new version of Bonita. I'm done with the presentation. Would you have questions? We're happy to answer. As I was saying, for 1 year now, I've been the product owner. It's kind of an evolution from being a satellite to the R&D team. As a usability person, as Bonita Soft has been created around the R&D team, it was pretty difficult to get ideas through. It took some time, but we finally made it happen. And now as a product owner, it's already good to work with marketing, finding what the new features should be from users' feedback, but also the company strategy, and then break that down so that the R&D team can easily understand what we're expecting. So we spend more time in the analysis of the use cases, and then we spend less time on figuring out how to make this happen technically. We do it on a second level, and we think we lose less time by doing this. So the evolution from the usability person to the product owner person also, I found out, saved some time for the development team. So it's also really good feedback. Have you worked on the usability of the Bonita console with the team? And if so, how successful do you consider the results? What do you call the console? Is it the portal, the user portal, or the administrator portal you're talking about, Miguel? The portal administrator, okay. Yeah, well, first thing, we have worked on the task list, which is the user portal. But as we are developing a platform to build a custom application for our customers, we have left the task list pretty recently. We're not going to develop more on the functionalities. Now for the administrator, as we said, Bonita Soft was sorry, the English word is hard to get. We were targeting more features. So in the question of priority, we wanted more features for the administrator than improvement on the existing functionalities. So all new pages came with the new process with usability involved. For the existing pages, it's still something under discussion to improve the task list for the administrator, for example, the process list, and we are now redoing the pages for the administrators one by one, so that they also, because of technical constraint, because we are still on Google Web Toolkit technology, and we want to switch to AngularJS technology. So as we are redoing the pages for technical reasons first. We also improved the usability, so it was a good opportunity to catch. But Miguel, if you have feedback to give us on where we should become more usable on the portal administrator, we're happy to hear about this. As a product owner, it's my own interest to hear users' feedback for improvement. If you would like, yeah, sorry? Yeah, I was just about to say that if you would like to talk about the your own situation of development and how you try to tackle the usability issues or processes internally, I'd be happy to receive emails after that and discuss about your specific situation later on and hopefully give you advice on this.
Okay, it looks like we're just about at the end of our time frame here. I'd like to invite everybody to reach out to Nathalie directly. You've seen her contact info on that last slide of the presentation. Also, if you have any questions or would like to discuss in more detail about some ongoing projects or future goals that you might have, please feel free to reach out. I've added our contact form link in the chat. It's located at the bottom of your GoToWebinar dashboard. And we'll look forward to hearing from you and trying to assist you as much as possible. A recording of this webinar will be posted on YouTube and Vimeo and our website shortly, so you can come back, revisit it, and use some of the knowledge displayed here. So once again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. We truly hope you have a great day. Thank you, Nathalie, for a great presentation, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Goodbye.